Hi witches, so today we are formally moving on to our next topic for the month of August, and that is the tarot. I feel like this is a really important part for me to have in my Book of Shadows, and I think that a lot of witches work with tarot because it's super duper accessible, so I wanted to spend a lot of time dedicated to talking about it and answering any questions, because I know that it can seem really intimidating at first, but it's actually really fun and a really great divinatory tool. So I really love reading tarot. Again, like I said, I think it's a pretty standard tool in a lot of witches' practices, but it is really, really accessible these days, which is amazing because, oh my gosh, when I first started learning about all this, I feel like there weren't as many options, and a lot of them were really lame looking. So I'm really glad that artists are now kind of expanding and exploring the tarot in various artistic ways. So as a quick aside, if you are interested in getting a tarot reading from yours truly, I do have a Patreon. I do monthly and or weekly Patreon tarot readings depending on what offering you sign up for. So there's that. And I do a lot of other things there as well. So there's extra information, extra little tidbits and stuff, spells, etc. Sometimes I can make some of the different levels have crystals and spell jars and stuff. So I really encourage you guys to check it out. It helps me do this, and it's something that I want to start really getting more active about because I want to do this as my profession. So if you want to help me out, check out my Patreon. There's no obligation, and you will always get these videos for free. And also the videos on Patreon are ad-free if that is something that you are interested in. So yes, for beginners, if you guys have never heard of the tarot or are not super familiar, tarot cards actually date back to the 15th century, which is a very long time ago, and were actually used to play games. So in college, I took an Italian course, and we actually played a game called Ottocento, and used tarocchi cards. So you can kind of see that is the root of the word, and it was really fun. And as a witch, I was just so they don't necessarily have a mystical origin, but that all changed around the 18th century, so that's the 1700s. Mystics and oracles began to use them for divinatory purposes. You see this a lot with court magicians in the 1700s in England and France and stuff, which is actually a very cool concept that I don't know a whole lot about, but I do want to read more, John Dee and all the court magicians and alchemists and astrologers and stuff. I think is really interesting, and not something that we hear talked about a whole lot, I feel but I don't know, maybe that's just me. I'm also in the middle of watching Merlin, which is a different time period, but they have a magician in the court and stuff. It's cool. Anyways, the Rider-Waite tarot deck is generally seen as the standard tarot deck for divinatory purposes today, but this deck isn't as old as it might seem. It was actually published in the early 1900s in 1909, but it is seen as the gold standard, and the descriptions that I go through when I describe the cards are going to be based on the Rider-Waite tarot deck. So if you haven't bought a tarot deck and are interested in learning about it, that's kind of the one that I recommend the most. I don't personally have one, and I think that was kind of to my detriment. I definitely want to get a copy of it. It's just whenever I think about it, I'm always oh man, I just left the store, I should have gotten a deck, or I can't find one, you know what I mean? So that's definitely something I am interested in getting just to have. I think it's kind of a staple. But again, if you are first starting to learn the cards, I think that's probably the best avenue to go. It's something I wish I did because I didn't. I have a different tarot deck, and that's kind of the one I learned on, and I do think it was to my detriment a little bit. There are a lot of changes from the tarot cards. The Rider-Waite deck kind of deviated a lot from the tarot cards that were used prior. And it did actually see a significant decrease in the Christianized imagery that was on the cards. So prior to that, there was a lot of really heavily Christian imagery. Now, in the Rider-Waite deck, there is a lot of Christian imagery. There is a lot of Judeo-Christian, I would say. There's the Torah. There are references to King Solomon and stuff. So that is actually really cool in an occult sense. And I really do like that. But yes, so the deck I have is called the Medieval Scapini deck, and it was published in the 80s. I'm going to show you the first card that we're going to talk about today. I'll just show you. You can tell from the title, I think, but this is what it looks like. It's medieval art, and a lot of it is similar, but a lot of the descriptions that are in the Rider-Waite deck, I feel are a little bit more illustrative of the actual point, illustrative and whatever. And this one kind of is more an artistic stylized deck. So it was really hard when I first started learning because a lot of the guides were look at the mountains in the back, and I'm what are you talking about? This doesn't, what are you, So if you are first learning, like I said, and you were looking at different guides and stuff, most of them use the Rider-Waite as like the standard. So fun things to know. I love that deck, to be honest with you. It is like my first deck. It is the only deck I've ever really used for tarot card readings, and so I have a really deep connection with it. We've been working together for over 10 years. And I am hoping to have a new tarot deck by the end of the month. I have selected one, and I think I'm just gonna pull the trigger on it. I think it's gonna be really awesome. And I'm gonna do an unboxing this month. Sorry, excuse my tea. This month I figured it would be fun to walk us all through the major arcana. So in a tarot deck, if you are unfamiliar, there are 78 cards. 22 of these cards are not in a suit. So like if you're thinking of a deck of playing cards, you have like the diamonds, the hearts, the clubs, and the spades. Sorry, blanked on that one. I always forget that one. So similarly, we have 4 suits in the tarot. 22 of those cards, 78 cards in a tarot deck, 22 of them are not part of those 4 suits. 56 of those cards are in those 4 suits, and those are called the minor arcana. So we're going to be doing a brief overview of those a little bit later this month after we go through the major arcana. But the major suits of the tarot are the wands, the swords, the cups, and the pentacles. In my deck, it is called the coins, so just kind of be aware of that, but it means the same thing. Additionally, some tarot readers like myself like to divine 2 different meanings from each card, an upright and a reversed. I will be talking about both of those. Some people choose not to do that. It's completely up to the reader's preference, and it's completely up to you. So there are definitely a lot of different methods, and this is a very intuitive thing, so I feel like a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit like woo-woo, but I digress. Tarot is really fun, and we're all witches here, right? Or like, you know, learning about and stuff, so I think we can be a little bit mystical from time to time. The major arcana is really, really interesting though, and definitely the ones that people tend to focus on and highlight the most. They represent the fool's journey through being like from birth to death, basically, and his journey through life and how, you know, the various lessons along the way. So in the tarot deck, we are, right, us being people, we all start as being the fool. So, I guess I'll show you the card again. I don't know. I really just like the art, so I'm probably going to be holding this up a lot, or various cards up a lot throughout all these videos, so sorry. The card we have starts at 0, as you can see up here, and usually there is a number on the top of the major arcana in like most standard tarot decks, so if you're unsure, you can just look for it. But that is the Fool, and that's where we're going to start. So this card is representative of new beginnings and is illustrative of a free spirit. Because this card is numbered 0, it can be placed at the beginning of the sequence or at the end, or both technically, because, you know, we start as a fool in one subject and we learn all about it and then by the end of it we end up just kind of like it's like a principle of Zen, I believe. Like Zen Buddhism is like very steeped in this, where it's like it's just all a circle and you will always kind of come back to where you started. Like you can learn everything about a subject and not know anything about it at all, if that makes any sense. And that's sometimes how I feel about witchcraft, where I'm just like, oh my God, what? But the card depicts a young man, it's usually a young man, who is frolicking along, but is also about to step off the edge of a cliff. So you can kind of see that here. Look up the Rider-Waite tarot deck if you can't see it, if you want to like have that open while you're listening to me. I totally get that. He carries a white rose in most decks. He's not doing that in this one. And yeah, this one's a little bit silly. He carries a white rose to represent purity and is followed by a white dog that represents the same, but also represents loyalty and encourages him to take his first step kind of off this cliff, which seems like really crazy. But I definitely feel like that's relatable to a lot of people's experiences when they're first discovering something. They're like, oh, what is this? And like all of a sudden they're just like in it, right? So I think that's really relatable, and I think it's cool that it's been like relatable over a very long period of time. There are mountains in the background of this card, and that represents looming challenges. But as the Fool is not looking at them, it is indicative of his excitement to kind of just like get things going without any regard for these potential challenges ahead, which I think, again, is very relatable when we are first starting a project. We're like, yes, this is awesome, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden you're like, I did not see these unintended consequences, oh my gosh. So when you are reading this card upright, it can reflect enthusiasm, new beginnings, innocence, purity, loyalty, stuff like that, which we see a lot in the imagery. But when you reverse it, it can kind of take a darker turn. And generally speaking, though not always, it's kind of hard to say these sweeping generalizations about every single card. But if you're reading it reversed, it sometimes has some more of negative connotations. I think that kind of makes sense within the context of life, right? But not always. Like the Three of Swords, when you have it reversed, it's like the Three of Swords is usually like my breakup card. Like if I see that, I'm just like, get some ice cream, like let's get some movies. But when it's reversed, it's more about like moving on from heartbreak. So there are definitely upsides to having a reversal. It's not always bad. But anyways, as a reversed card, the Fool generally points to recklessness, unforeseen consequences, uncalculated risks, fear of the unknown, fear of failure, and holding oneself back because of it. So if you see that, maybe that's, you know, the universe telling you to stop and just like get going with it, because you're about to like stumble onto something awesome. Now, as part of the videos for this month, I do want to share some like personal ties to the cards and how I interpret them in my personal life. So I do relate a lot to the Fool card. I think I'm a little bit past it, and you will see that in the next video. But I'm in a weird spot where like I'm in my early to mid 20s. I'm about to turn 24, which is like the worst thing I've ever heard, because like, oh my God. What? 24? That means I'm almost 25, which means I'm almost 30. Like, but I feel like an old crone on the internet. I'm just like, hello, fellow cool teens. Like, what? But like, I'm kind of realizing in this moment, like in this time, that like what I really want to do is like freaking teach witchcraft and just like be like just in it like all the time. Like it is my favorite freaking thing in the entire world, and that's why I talk so much about it, I think. And I really think that this is like what my calling is to foster a witchy community, to foster like a spiritual group where people can learn about themselves and grow and, you know, progress down their own personal paths, and to be a guide, which makes me feel like I'm like, when I say that out loud, it sounds like really like narcissistic and like crazy, like let me be your guide. Like, no, I'm not trying to say that, but if I can help people, that's what I want to do with my life. I hope that makes sense. At the same time, I kind of feel like I'm just a disaster. Like maybe this is just me focusing on like my poor mental health, because like but I feel like I'm really focused on like the mountains in the background of the card, and I need that little white dog to like encourage me to like really just go for it. So I'm definitely focusing on those next steps, and I'm really ready to slide down that cliff. It's just, hopefully it's into something amazing and not as daunting as I think. So anyways, I think this is going to be a really fun series. I know this was a longer video, but I did want to get in the history of the tarot. I am talking super fast because I am very caffeinated, so I am sorry. But yes, let me know what you guys think. I hope you are excited about this, and I will see you tomorrow with another another tarot explanation. Bye guys.